Welcome to assignment number 4. It's our last assignment of the month and it's the most complicated. It involves taking a day in your life or a moment and making a short form journal comic. And this is something that I started to do when I realized that it was just really hard and I wanted to practice and get better at it. I'm going to show you some of my favorite artists who do this, and one thing that I like about it is that it's a great way for me to capture a moment in a way that a camera never could. And I always like to look at these later. Good luck with this one. This book by Yumi Sakagawa I've had for a long time. I think this is when I first became inspired to illustrate thoughts and personal experiences, not in any kind of autobiographical way, but in like an introspective kind of way. I mean, look at this figure filled with this kind of dreamscape. I liked the hand lettered, kind of wonky sentences that really float throughout the page. This is just black and white, but she's made it interesting with all of these different types of media, the line work, the composition, sometimes made of bubbles, squares, or free-floating images. So I'm going to talk more about other books and styles at the end of this. But I had to mention where all of this began because I'm not a lifelong comics person. I wish I could say that I was. It's kind of a recent, in the last 5 to 10 years of my life, kind of a exploration. And it's so hard. I think I'm fascinated with how much work there is to do. From the writing to the editing to condensing to rough drafts to final drafts. And then deciding whether to go forward and get the lettering on there or do it digitally later. Here's another rough draft with a final draft. Although I think I like the rough draft better many times. For a while, I would just paint. I was fond of doing these 4-panel comics. And I usually paint a series of colored squares onto paper that's just ready to go, because that feels like I'm halfway there somehow. This one I added the text later after I edited it many times. I don't remember what it's about right now. This was during the pandemic, trying to capture, what it was like to be confined and be in the moment or distract yourself in order to get through. Then I started to hand paint the lettering, get a little more brave about that. These were actually painted from a life drawing session. That's why the figure's naked. And later I just had this single sentence. How much of our lives are spent just waiting? And this isn't even about any action, it's just a single thought. I think this was the first time I got everything on there and didn't have to do anything in Photoshop. This one is about not being able to be in the present and kind of racing forward and backwards in time until the end of time. But sometimes you can connect the panels by some kind of image that's passing through. This one is a little more in depth. Boy, this is what I miss now. I wanted to capture that feeling you get in a bookstore with a coffee shop in it, where you can just kind of show up. You don't know what you're looking for. You grab a bunch of things that are on display and you kind of sit there and contemplate which one you're going to get. Or maybe you just look at them all and put them all back. This This is a little more polished. I was trying to capture the experience, the frustration of trying to figure out how to delete one's Amazon Prime membership. I decided that the easiest thing would be to buy a time machine, wait for one to be available, buy it, go back in time, and then don't sign up. I think that's the easiest way. Sometimes, let's see, I think this is kind of a free-floating thing. I was at a poetry festival and I was thinking, a group of us were talking about the words we couldn't stand, either the sound of or just having to say it, versus favorite words. So that became a comic. Here's one I made a time lapse of that I'll show you. This is very recent. I got totally mortified by something that was kind of public. I'm not going to go into it, of course, but I forgot how that feeling lingers and you just want it to go away, but it's going to take time. So this is chronicling the different urges I had to kind of get far away or process that feeling. I pulled a tarot card that signaled new projects. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to take that page filled with squares and I'm going to just make a memory of everything that happened after feeling mortified. I'm kind of fond of the 4-panel format, but of course you can do a single one. You can make many, many panels. This was during the wildfire, like double lockdown of having terrible air and viruses. And one single day felt very long. So I thought, why don't I chronicle kind of a good and a bad moment all day long and contrast them. I did a lot of sketches before I ended up here, and then I wasn't sure if I liked the complexity, and I did this panel over thinking, why don't I use my phone to cross over both and talk about the good ways that a phone can bring good things in your life and the bad news it can also deliver. You can go crazy and do a huge page of many, many panels. I still always do the panels first and then figure out how to fill them in. Maybe that's backwards, but that's how I like it. This was on my birthday and I wanted to put a bunch of little things that happened. Everything from sort of simple shapes that I made up to like a pine cone that I went and found and drew from life so it would be more realistic. Especially Billy, I needed a photo reference, although she still looks like she's yelling instead of singing. I was looking at another artist's work named Wilma F. Clint. Here's an album I tried to recreate that I was listening to. It's all in one color, basically, or 3 shades that are closely related. And that's something I like to do when I want to just cut down the decisions that I have to make. This is another pandemic comic. It's a good way to process things. Where I was part of a group and we were all challenged to take the theme of hands and make anything over the course of an hour and a half. So I just wanted to chronicle like what my hands had done throughout the day. And it got simpler and simpler at the end. I like the last few panels. Almost like the narrative is just slowing down to a crawl. All right, that's it for the examples. Here's a time-lapse recording of filling in this recent 4-panel comic about feeling mortified. I definitely always put the colored squares down on paper on different random days just so they're ready to go. So when the mood hits and the idea is in my mind, I can just grab it and start filling in the details.